Welcome to the Producer's Chair, where Nashville's top record producers give you their stories on how they got started in the music business. Join us at Soundstage Studios in Nashville as they share defining moments in their careers to their historic relationships with the biggest artists, musicians, and songwriters in the industry today. And now, the host of the Producer's Chair, James Ray.
On this episode of the Producer's Chair, I welcome Forrest Glen Whitehead. If ever there was a success story that needed to be told, Forrest Glen Whitehead is it. His incredibly intuitive approach to chasing the dream, miraculously considering the odds, got him assigned to Black River Publishing by Celia Froehlig in just 2 years. Now, you also came to Nashville with a basic knowledge of recording. You know, you started writing and playing guitar when you were about 12 years old. You started writing songs immediately, and you started learning how to record the songs you were writing. Tell us a little bit about how you started recording. And how you were doing that.
Well, I guess I was introduced to it whenever I wanted to record my band at the time. We played quite a bit of churches, and the sound guy at the church that we were at helped us with our first recording, and that was the first time that I experienced somebody setting up mics and getting sounds, and
Was that on cassette you were recording back then, or?
Well, I guess my earliest recordings, I did do cassette, like way early when I first started playing. When we started recording the bands, that was a little bit later. But yes, I did record to cassettes. I would record songs off the radio, and then I figured out, okay, it has a mic to it, so I can play a part, play that back, and then also record on a different tape and start layering different parts. And so as soon as I started like playing instruments, I would record to a lot of cassettes and just keep layering different instruments, and was just fascinated by that.
And how old were you then?
Probably 13 or 14.
13 or 14?
Mm.
And arriving in Nashville now when you're 19 years old, okay, how instrumental as a songwriter and, someone who wants to pursue a career in the music industry, how instrumental was knowing how to record? Even if it was, at a very kind of beginner level.
I didn't even understand the asset it would be until, I got here and understood that tracks were becoming a thing in Nashville. We're building tracks on a laptop, and the ability to walk away from a co-write with a recorded version of that song to be able to produce it up. I didn't know what an asset that was whenever I was learning all the things. It's just, I was fascinated by it and I was passionate about it. So I just spent so many hours trying to figure that part out, and didn't even really incorporate it in my songwriting for, I don't know why, but when I first started writing in town, the first couple of years, I didn't incorporate it. And until nothing really happened for me as just a sole songwriter, writing songs and recording a work tape and maybe doing demos.
Yeah.
Nothing really happened until I started incorporating the tracks. And so whenever I realized the doors that would open, that's whenever I said, okay, this is what I'm going to, do all the time now, instead of just show up with a guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you landed here, okay, like I said, at 19 years old, tell us a little bit about that moment in time in your life where you left Louisiana, came up here, landed here, and kind of got started. Just walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I just knew that I couldn't be in Shreveport and make a living doing something that I love. My whole, reasoning for showing up in this town was just the chance of something happening. I did not know what it would. I had no idea I would be like a producer. Or I probably didn't even know what that was really. I just wanted to be around music, and I knew if I moved to Nashville that I'd get better at it because I'd be around people that were better than me. And so that was the whole thought of getting here. It wasn't necessarily strategic. I'm going to move there and become a songwriter and get a deal. And I just showed up to see what it was all about.
Yeah.
And as I was in town,
just
I was
a lot of faith.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's not really many jobs that you can do back where I'm from that sound interesting that I would want to do. So it's one of those things where I knew that this was my only chance. I remember having a conversation with my parents. They're like, we'll either help you, go to college, or we'll help you move to Nashville. And I was like, I'm going to Nashville,
Right.
And my dad helped me buy a travel trailer. And, it was actually around this time in 2009, I remember the leaves were all changing whenever we pulled in. It seemed like a magical place. That sounds cheesy, but it really was to me. Like when we first rolled in, I was just like, my God, this place is beautiful.
Yeah.
There's so much music around here. My dad dropped the trailer at the KOA campground, and just left me
by
there.
Opryland?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Left me there a couple of days later. He came out and he, he said it was one of those hardest things, which I didn't know. But it was just like, it was cool to come into town at a time where, it just looked awesome and it just had the vibes all over it. And since that day, I've just fell in love with it more and more.
How much money did you have in your pocket?
I saved up, I dropped a lot on a travel trailer. The travel trailer probably cost me like $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then my part of it. And then, so I probably only had $1,000 in my pocket, but it was enough or I felt like it was enough to, take me a little while, but I found out real quick that.
Right. Well, I mean, we all came to Nashville with a little bit of money in our pockets, right?
A little bit,
and we kind of got to judge how long it's going to take us to run out of money. So what did you do to make a living at that point?
I refused to get a job that would pull me away selfishly, that to pull me away from why I came here. So I knew somebody who managed a pawn shop who was able to give me a job, but also give me hours off when I needed to, if I had a co-write or if I had a gig to play or whatever I had to do. So I was very fortunate to meet him, who was kind of from a town that was about 30 minutes from where I grew up. So he moved up here and been up here a while, but I was grateful to meet him, and he really was my, I guess, family when I first moved here. I spent my Thanksgivings over there and everything else when I didn't have family up here.
Yeah.
And he gave me a job, and and then shortly after that, through him, I met another guy named Ron Griffin, and he gave me a place to live after I moved out of the travel trailer, which was ironically like 2 weeks before the flood came. And had I been in that trailer, had I been in that trailer, I would have lost a lot of stuff. So it was kind of crazy, the timing of moving out of the trailer and getting into a townhome in Donaldson.
Did you get in that first year that you were here? Did you find yourself getting discouraged at all once you saw the lay of the land?
Sure. I mean, I think there was a lot of discouragement at first, but I just knew that if I just hung out long enough that, or I just believed that if I hung out long enough that I would just learn and, meet the right people. I mean, I spent, probably about 1.5 years, 2 years not meeting the right people and, spending my time with things that, necessarily didn't lead to anything, but I'm grateful for that part of my journey too, because it makes me appreciate, finally being able to get in the doors. And that growth period of the songs that I was writing then, and, being able to kind of sharpen my skills before I was able to meet the right people.
What do you think, looking back at this point in time, what do you think you might have been the most naive about in terms of the industry and the business that you were wanting to get into?
Well, I was definitely naive on how to get your songs to a legit publisher. And, I was literally knocking on doors, walking down Music Row with the CD in my pocket of my songs that I wrote, some from back home.
You didn't knock on my door. No, I'm kidding.
Well, where were you playing at? Because I knocked on them all. Let me tell you. But like, just, I mean, I was handing them to anybody who would take them. And, so it's just, that's not the way to do it. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was naive and, so green. Yeah. And, but I just, I was just hungry for something.
Playing your songs for people in their cars and.
Well, I mean, just everything, I think I gave a CD to people just randomly walking down the street, just very green stuff, you know.
So you started like, most songwriters when they come to town, you started knowing you have to, that you wanted to meet people and hopefully meet some of the right people. You started doing writers' nights, right? Where were you playing?
I was playing the Commodore Hotel, and then I was playing the Bluebird. Very first venue I ever played with the Bluebird, it was an open mic night though. And so it was like, I even did that like a trip to Nashville before I actually moved here, and that was my first experience with the Bluebird, and I was really blown away by all the stories and all the everything that's happened there. And Douglas Corners, another place, the Listening Room. Before it was downtown, it was in Cumming Stations at the time. If any of y'all remember that,
sure.
So yeah, that was, and I met a lot of people that way, and a lot of people that linked me to other songwriters through going out and doing writers' nights.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you said something in our pre-show interview that I think is important again to say at this moment in time. You said, "I didn't focus on the competition. I focused on surrounding myself with people who made me better," which is kind of the opposite of what we said initially of you trying to draw the best out of people. When you,
right.
you know, same thing.
Well, I think I was more inspired by the competition. So I would have friends of mine who would have songs by Brandy Clark,
Mm-hmm.
or a comp of Josh Osborne or whatever that is, and so I heard those early songs and would even I had Ashley Gorley comps, and these writers are were then and now still killing it, and it's just like I would just listen to them, and people thought I would be weird because I would go online, find their face on the internet, put it in my library so I know what they look like. And so if I recognized them out, I'd be like, oh, that's Brandy Clark, or that's Josh Osborne or whatever. I was just that obsessed with songwriters, Jeffrey Steele, Craig Wiseman,
Mm-hmm.
all those guys. I would just learn their catalog. And when I started diving into that, I found that like there was a consistent thing that I didn't just love Kenny Chesney. I loved all the Craig Wiseman, Kenny Chesney cuts.
Yeah.
Or the same thing with Tim McGraw.
Sure.
And so, I just got obsessed with learning about songwriters. And so I didn't necessarily look at them as competition. More than I did is, well, I want to be like them. So
you studied their stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And did you experience a lot of co-writes, in that first couple of years that just didn't gel?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
A lot of people do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is you're still trying to find in the early stages of moving and pursuing this thing, you're still trying to find out what you're doing. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing, but I know a lot more now than I did then, as
Mm-hmm.
far as like showing up and what my value is in the room, and what other people's value is, and I feel like I recognize it a lot more now than I did then, as far as, what space to fill.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of writing is learning how to get out of the way too, and not try to take the song in a certain direction if the other
Mm-hmm.
people aren't feeling.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are some of the things that you realized about co-writing that made a difference?
Well, just making it more collaborative. I would be so attached to my ideas or something that I thought that it should be this way, and as soon as I started thinking, okay, what do you think about this? What do you think of this lick, or how can we make this better? Once I started doing that, instead of trying to impress everybody, and try to let them know, hey, I can do lyrics, I can do music, I can do all this stuff, and just kind of got out of the way and serviced as, what can we do? What can I bring to you? They may have a book of lyrics, so it's my job to be the music man that day. But if they bring me a lick, I want to be able to, help them with a lyric,
Yeah.
So.
And that was something that you said to me that I thought was kind of interesting, because you mentioned that sometimes you go into a writing session and you might not have the hook or you might not have the idea, but you were definitely in on the co-write, and they needed someone to record that day. And so all of these different things that people can bring to that co-writer are really important.
It could even be somebody in the room just saying, no, I don't think that's where we should go, or let's try this direction. They might not even have a line in the song, but if they point it in a direction that's right, that rings true to them, because songwriting is just all about being real and trying to find what rings true, and seems real. So sometimes you need that other personality to kind of say, hey, that it feels better if we take it this way.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you were, studying songwriters like Craig Wiseman and Jeffrey Steele and so on. I found it kind of interesting that you specifically mentioned two things to me. You said that you studied song structure and imagery. Yeah,
I can tell you that most hit songs are in the chorus about 30 seconds, and then the first lyric is in about 7 to 10 seconds. It's breaking it down to how do you keep somebody's attention?
Yeah.
What kind of opening line do you have? Just really being over the top weird about looking at songs.
Yeah. Have you had an opportunity to write with some of these songwriters who you studied in the beginning?
Sure.
Like who?
Sure. I mean, Ashley Gorley, Hillary Lindsay, being in the room with those people and the doors that have opened in the past couple of years. I mean, it blows me away, because, the company it's totally different, and it's so cool to be inspired by those people, and then also learn that they're no different than you.
Right.
They're just consistent, and they're just as passionate.
And they got here first.
A lot of things, and the first person that really taught me this was Brandy Clark. The first time I wrote with her, how encouraging she was in the room, and how it lifted me up and made me feel better. And I was like, there's something to that, so I took that experience, and now I bring that in my other co-writes, and I try to be, instead of, sometimes I can be guilty about just being really quiet and off in my own head trying to work through something, but instead of responding to somebody being like, that's great, you're awesome, that helps the mood a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's just being in co-writes where you just pick up little things like that and think, well, that went good, I want to try to incorporate that myself. So it's just learning from those people, and 'cause that's who I want to be. I've looked at those people and thought, man, if they can do it, I can do it too. You know?
Yeah.
So,
This is great, for me and for the show, and I know for everybody in the audience who's going to watch the show, because this is like more than songwriting 101, And I think that if a lot of people knew what you're talking about prior to coming here and really paid attention to it, that their journey would be a lot easier and a lot quicker. So I'm really pleased that you're here to share that with us. I guess looking back, one of the real pieces of the puzzle that came together was one night you were playing at the Commodore, and Jason Massey came up and introduced himself to you. And tell us about that.
I gotta tell you, if you know Jason, it's very unlikely of him to go out of his way to introduce himself to somebody or whatever. So it was just one of those things where randomly I'd heard some music from a band called Ruffle Hill at the time, and I found them online. I was really obsessed with the production and stuff, and it was so weird that about a week later this guy comes up to me after I got off stage and says, hey man, I just want to let you know, I've been listening to your stuff online or whatever, and I dig what you do. And that was pretty much the extent of it. And then I remember working at the pawn shop one day and seeing his name on the Ruffle Hill stuff. I'm like, I think that's the guy that I met.
I think that's a guy I met.
I think that is. And Nashville's a small town.
Yeah.
And it was. And I remember calling really early one morning, just freaking out, be like, dude, did you do this? Like, is this your work? And he was like, yeah. And then I asked him about, what his process was for recording and what he used, and went over to his place and saw that he just used like a little laptop, had very few instruments, and I maybe had a desktop at the time, but I mean, it's like he didn't have a lot, but he was making these tracks that were just anything I would dream to do. And so from the get-go, I was just inspired by him, and so and he opened a lot of doors for me, and as far as introducing me to people who got me from A to B.
I understand. Yeah, he introduced you to Bonnie Baker, who in turn introduced you to, I believe, Robert Philhart over at ASCAP. And that was also a very pivotal moment.
Sure.
Because Robert started sending you out to publishing companies once he listened to some of your catalog and got to know you a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting part was, and you mentioned this to me, that at the same time as Robert was doing that, Robert Carlton, right, was also telling Celia Froehlig over here at Black River about you.
Here's how the Nashville works. So I met with Jeff Carlton over at I'll forget the name of the publishing company, Bigger Picture maybe. And his son's Robert Carlton, obviously. And then he would take my comps home playing for Robert, and Robert worked for Celia, so Robert played for Celia, and so that's just how it worked.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know at the time that that's what was going on.
And then she starts hearing from Robert Philhart at ASCAP about the same guy.
Sure. And I feel like that's how it works in this town. Like you start working with a lot of people, and there's a little chatter that starts to happen, and people start hearing that consistent name. And I feel like that's whenever people really want to make the next move on whatever it is. But.
Well, that was a pretty short journey. I mean, coming to Nashville, and you came here in 2009. You got signed to Black River in 2011.
That's right.
So it was a 2-year journey, and that's fast in Nashville. It truly is. But you mentioned to me that there was, Black River was quite different back then in 2011 than now.
Sure.
Okay. But you mentioned to me that there was, share that with us, because you said there was just something about the people and.
It was an independent place, so it didn't seem as corporate to me. Now at the time they had Craig Morgan, they had Kelly Pickler, but it's not like they had a new artist that was killing it yet. So I mean, there was a lot of you could say people probably didn't necessarily believe in it as much as I believed in it at the time, but I saw the opportunity when I walked in the doors. No, it wasn't a Sony. No, it wasn't a Warner Brothers. It wasn't that kind of name behind it, but I saw the opportunity with the label and the publishing company tied in. I thought, man, it'd be really cool if like I could write some songs for like an artist on the label. Or something. You know, that was the thought early on. So that was the outlet that I saw, and besides, it wasn't necessarily that hooked me. It was more the vibe and the people here, and you know, it just felt different than other places that I've been in. I don't know, it just felt comfortable. That's the only way I can describe it. It's
like
just
family,
that,
like home.
It's just that knowing thing that you know, at that time I'd met with quite a few publishers and had a couple of them tell me that I needed to go to NSAI and I wasn't ready to be meeting with publishers, you know, that whole thing. So you just know when you walk into a room with people that when the vibe's right. And so that's what I relied on, and thankfully.
That's so interesting, you know, because I think that every songwriter who ever comes to Nashville has been told to go to NSAI, you know, and it's interesting that it's on one hand, it's a little bit discouraging for someone to say that, you know, you need to go to their, you know, their Thursday night things.
I have to say, NSAI does great things.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the time, I'd been to that. I'd already was involved in NSAI. I already had done the little song submissions and where they critique your songs. I felt like I'd already been there. So to hear that, I felt like I was a little past that part of it. I felt like, you know, I needed to be meeting with publishers, but some of them didn't think so.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how, you know, everybody's perception of the music that you're writing is completely different.
Sure.
And I find that, you know, that's always interesting, because you can have this group of publishers or even people who critique at NSAI over there, you know, who are saying, well, you know, you need work and you need this and you need that. Sure. And then all of a sudden you meet someone who goes, I love your stuff.
That's exactly right. Everybody has an opinion in this town.
Yeah.
And it's really changing that opinion to a believer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Someone who's willing to take the chance.
Your first cut was Dylan Scott on Curb, I believe, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And then you wound up with a Brantley Gilbert cut. Lights of My Hometown, which you co-wrote with Brantley and Brian Davis.
Yeah, Brantley was never in the room. That's an interesting Nashville kind of story. I wrote it. I wrote it with Brian Davis, and we had written all of it, and he had played it out on the road with. Well, we'd written everything but the bridge.
Okay.
And he was touring with Brantley at the time, and he played it in the back of the bus for him. Brantley was like, I really like that, but it's missing something. And then so I got a call one day, and Brian was like, hey man, I hope you don't mind, but Brantley put a bridge on our song, and I think he's going to cut it. I was like, that's crazy, you know? That's awesome, you know? And that was one of my first Nashville experiences of getting a song cut like that. But I will say that was an inside cut.
Sure.
From playing it directly to the artist, and since then, you know, that's been most of my career.
Mm-hmm. And you also have a Terry Clark cut, I Cheated on You, which you co-wrote with Brandy Clark.
Brandy Clark. That was the first song we wrote together.
Now I'm curious, how did you and Brandy Clark get together? How did that happen?
Brent Anderson is his name. He's a songwriter. He's one of the most talented guys in this town, singing wise, playing wise. I mean, he's a freak of nature as far as a musician and a writer. But anyways, I started writing with him, and I knew that he wrote with Brandy, and obviously a big fan of Brandy. And I don't think I even brought it up. I think he brought it up. Hey man, I'll get Brandy on one of our days, and I was just like, oh my God, that'd be crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, and then so she came in one day, and I was so nervous, but I really was. But like I said, that was where a big lesson was learned, because of how encouraging she was to me in the room. And I thought, I have nothing at that. I don't even think I had maybe I had the Brantley thing at that point, but I mean, it wasn't much. And so for her to, I don't know, it just surprised me the way that I felt like a better writer after writing with her.
Yeah.
And I thought that's cool, for her to do that. Cause I mean, she probably knows I was freaking out about her. But,
Now, it's interesting also that, you got signed to Black River first. Kelsey had not been signed.
Not at the time.
To Black River. She got signed to her publishing deal first, and then her record deal later. But you were signed to Black River prior to that.
Sure.
So when Kelsey did get signed, okay, and tell me about the first couple times that you two got together and started writing.
Cool. I remember the first song we wrote. I think it made it on the record. Wasn't it Out of the Blues, I think? Yeah, it was Out of the Blues, and that was the very first song we wrote. And she had a lot of, she had the idea or whatever, and our first time, I think I had like a little track going. And it's funny, what happened that first time is still what we do to this day, but it felt so effortless. We both just got it. We both, really just, it was just an effortless process. That's all I can say. And sometimes whenever you get in a room with people, you never know, you kind of have to feel it out, but it was just like, it was go time. And then, it was yeah.
Now you've also done some session work. You played on Brett Clark's Standing Back. You played on Carrie Underwood's Storyteller. How did those sessions come about?
Well, Brandy Clark. I was
really?
Yeah, I was in a roundabout way. Brandy Clark. I was playing on the road with her for about a year, and she was cutting a record, her sophomore album with Jay Joyce, and so she wanted me involved in that for whatever reason, and I was another one of those things where I was like, I felt like I shouldn't be in that room. I was with Jay Joyce and a bunch of other A-class musicians or whatever, and totally felt so lucky to even be there and experience that. And it was a Saturday, and we were cutting with Brandy we were getting ready to go home that Saturday. We were cutting with Brandy again at noon the next day, but Jay was like, hey, if you don't mind coming in early tomorrow, I have a couple more sessions or whatever that, if you want to do. And I'm like, man, that's crazy that he would ask that, but I'd already been there, had my gear set up. So I did. I came in early the next day and did not know what the session was or whatever. I put on my headphones and it's Carrie Underwood singing. I'm like, oh my God. And so yeah, that's one of those another Nashville stories, just right place, right time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said to me, I would rather show up and have an artist in the room and try to develop what that is rather than just trying to write and get cuts on other artists. So I guess really up until the point in time when you and Kelsey got together, you were pretty much headed in that direction of just writing to get cuts with other artists. Was the collaboration that started with you and Kelsey, was that kind of the moment in time when you realized the difference, that you are writing with an artist? And,
And it was, I would say she was the first successful one. I'd worked with other artists early on, and that the singles necessarily didn't work out right, but it was the experience of working with that artist and learning that, hey, instead of me trying to push my ideas on this artist, what do they want to say and how do we say it in a way that's different to make them stand out? So that's whenever those wheels started turning, as far as trying to think of writing in a different way. Yeah. And writing with Kelsey is whenever it was just like I keep saying it, but it was just effortless in the sense of we just enjoyed the same things. The things that I would normally do just were the right vibe for the song. Where normally, even before, I would say that I would kind of limit myself and think, oh, well, that wouldn't be country music, or that wouldn't be, So being able to write with her and the creative freedom that had encouraged me in other writing sessions. You know?
Did you necessarily have a lot of the same influences, or were they different, which is what made it more interesting?
I'm sure they're a lot of the same and different at the same time, but it's just 90s pop and everything that was popular. That's what I love. I've always loved just popular music, and I feel like she's the same way. And just so we share that in common as far as wanting to study what makes a song popular. Why do people a lot of people like to listen to music that nobody else has heard about or whatever, that's kind of an underground thing, and that's cool too. I respect that. Yeah. But personally, I've just always been obsessed with figuring out what makes a hit and why it touches a lot of people. And I feel like she's the same way in that. So when we get together, yeah.
When you were in the early stages of co-writing with Kelsey, did you have any thoughts or any idea that you actually may wind up producing her, or was that like the furthest thing from your mind?
Well, I have to say this backstory a little bit, because it's just weird the way the world works. When I started incorporating the production, I remember telling my publishers at the time, Robert and Celia, that I would love to produce the next Shania Twain. And they thought it was odd that I would pick a female or whatever. I love Shania. Yeah. I love Taylor Swift. That's something that I wouldn't tell all my friends at home, but I did. That was just, I love their albums. I love their records. And, so from a long early early time, I was studying that specifically, the female country, and what set them apart. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And about whenever they signed her, and we started writing together, I think it just organically happened. As far as like I produced a demo and she seemed to like it, but I never thought that I would be producing a record for sure.
Right.
It was just I was just showing up, doing what I did every day.
And inevitably, in Nashville, I mean, how many great producers are there in Nashville? I mean, from Doug Johnson right here at Black River, and on and on and on.
Absolutely.
I mean, to the Dan Huffs and everybody else.
Yeah.
And I understand that there were, that was a big consideration.
Yeah,
because,
I'm sure
because this was their golden girl.
Yeah.
Who they were about to
there's a lot
launch.
riding on that. It's a
lot
new
riding
artist,
on it.
And for them to be able to be up for it was crazy in itself. But and a lot of the influence came from her.
Yeah.
To allow me to have that position, so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, you mentioned to me that she really went to bat for you on that.
Without her, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Wow.
So
that's
it's
incredible. Incredible loyalty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm sure other producers were considered. And let's just acknowledge that a normal, younger female artist that comes to town that wants that opportunity, they'll be willing to do whatever. Put me with whatever producer, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Like I want to sing. Get me in there to sing. Let's make a record. But for her to have the consistency and to believe that I was the right man for the job, that shows a lot about her.
It sure does. Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. When you found out that you got the gig, producing Kelsey, was that immediate? Was that a feeling of relief or pressure?
It wasn't necessarily a relief because it was a surprise. Whenever that I was considered to produce the actual record, so it was like.
So that was a complete surprise.
It was. I feel like
you never thought in a million years that would happen.
I wanted it to happen, but I didn't think that
it would.
I mean, I
did,
but it's like it would be so crazy for that to actually happen. So literally, it was a freak out process, early on, and just really trying to learn. All right, it's go time. I gotta figure this out.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
It's very reminiscent of Nathan Chapman when he was on the show a couple of years ago, and as a lot of you may know, that same thing happened with Nathan Chapman. With Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
They looked at a lot of other producers. A lot of other producers submitted demos and so on that they did, with Taylor, and Taylor went, no, Nathan's the guy, man.
She did.
He's the guy.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's wonderful. When you found out that you were going to be producing, the thing that I find so interesting and so mature on your part was you went, we got to get Jason Massey in on this to co-produce, because you had a vision, you had a sound for, and you and Kelsey had been working together for a couple of years, and you really had it down. And tell us what Jason Massey brought.
Well,
to the table.
It's like yin and yang.
Yeah.
As far as what we do, it's different, but where it meets in the middle is something special. As far as, he does a lot of percussive drum things and more the pop elements that make it really thematic, as far as whenever you listen to a track that, I haven't quite figured out yet, where I play guitar in a certain way that, is different than him. So it's the collaboration that, always excited me as far as visualizing what that sonically could potentially be like for Kelsey's record. Because the thought was, I just want this thing to rock a stadium with just hooky songs, and just to sound huge. And that was the intention of the first record.
Yeah.
And I knew that just the way he produced and making every chorus stand out. And also, he's not necessarily the most flashy player. It's very simplistic what he does. But I feel like that's important for Kelsey's music, because, it's the most simplest hooky parts that, are
like
on that
less
record.
is more,
Anybody playing guitar for 3 months can play her record.
Yeah.
But it's I feel like that's what makes it, what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just, you know, very few chords and simple licks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I feel like that's kind of what makes it stand out in
Mm-hmm.
a sense of here in Nashville, where you have all the best players in the world playing on records all the time, and they're great. I use those players all the time, but sometimes it's nice to, you know, be able to come up with a 3-part lick that's just stupidly simple.
Yeah. 3 chords and the truth.
Yeah, man. Sure.
You know, you talk about all the great players in Nashville, all of the great writers in Nashville, right? And I know that, you know, like we said earlier, you know, Kelsey was the golden girl. You know, she was the one that Black River kind of chose to, you know, to really launch the label.
Right.
And you got 6 songs on that first project. I mean, that is amazing because, and you know as well as I do, that the best song wins.
Right.
That's, you know, Doug Johnson has said that on this show, I don't know how many times, and so has every other producer. The best song wins. It doesn't matter who writes it.
Sure.
I think it's just incredible that you know, you pretty much co-wrote half the album.
Well, and that is true, the best song wins. But I will say, from a producer standpoint, there could be a lot of great songs to be considered, but is it the great song? Is that a great song for this record? As far as, does it expose a part of the artist that we want to reveal for this record, or like sonically, what does it sound like? What does it talk about? You know, is it true to that artist?
The album, the first time, was so aptly titled.
Yeah.
You know, the first time for you, the first time for Black River, the first time for Kelsey, the first time for Jason, I mean, it was a first in so many ways. And I thought it was tremendously apt. The first single, of course, Love Me Like You Mean It, absolutely skyrocketed to number 1.
Yeah. And I would even play that song. I pitched that song around town and people didn't get it. You know, they would say, oh, I don't see who would.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful they did.
Yeah, absolutely. Right from the get-go, this girl was a star. You know, how involved were you in the selection process of what singles were going to be released off the album?
Well, as far as the first single, I feel like it was unanimously everybody was kind of feeling Love Me. I mean, but there was that conversation, you know, what's the best song to lead off with?
Yeah.
And I feel like part of the reason why it was chosen is because it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
You know, immediately at the top of it, you know, especially at the time on country radio, you know, sonically and, you know, it just sounded different. And so I felt, or I still feel like that's very important, especially when trying to break an artist, is to make sure that the song sticks out like a sore thumb, where you have people that love it and you have just as many people that hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. The song absolutely flew to number 1. And Kelsey looked like she'd been doing this for years.
Right.
On her first video, didn't she?
I know.
I mean, was there any kind of development that you're aware of that Kelsey had to go through in terms of being comfortable with the camera and
I
all
can't
that,
speak for
or
on
was
that.
it just totally a natural thing with her?
I can say that, you know, whenever somebody wants something, what they experience when they're walking it out has already been gone through here.
Yeah.
So she's already practiced many times for that moment. So whenever she was ready to walk into it, that's why she looks like a veteran at it, because she had already probably been there so many times in here as far as what her video is going to look like. And I'm just a big believer in that too. You know, it's trying to practice it in your mind first before it actually, you know, comes out.
The two of you and Kelsey, and I'm sure Jason too, you all seem to be taking this incredibly huge success very much in your stride. Did anybody here at the label or any kind of mentor, or has there been anyone in your life in particular who has kind of acclimated you to what has happened in your life? Am I asking the question correctly? I'm not sure. You know what I mean? A lot of people, when all of a sudden there's huge success, I mean, like in your case, you told me that, you know, your phone has started to ring now for people wanting you to produce them and so on, right? Is it a little overwhelming, or It doesn't seem to be.
Well, I gotta say that it surprised us more than anybody. You know, as far as like the success of it and what it's doing. I mean, of course, that's what you hope for things to do, and that's what you dream for things to do. But for it actually to be sitting at number one is a completely different experience.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not necessarily focused on what has happened. I'm always looking ahead. I'm thinking how can we make record number 2 better, or how can I make the next artist that I'm working with better? You know, that's where my thoughts are. So I'm trying not to worry and get too consumed with what this is doing. I'm grateful for that. I acknowledge it. I mean, but I'm spend more time trying to figure out what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. On the album, you played banjo, bass guitar, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, mandolin, piano, slide guitar. You did background vocals and some programming.
Well, yeah, and Jason did equally.
As much.
Man,
you know,
between a drummer and a cello player, 4 people made that record. Every sonically thing you hear.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
It really is. So, you know, you produced it, played instruments on it, backup vocals, programming, co-writer. That's amazing. It really is. What an opportunity.
Absolutely.
That
And I feel like, you know, at the time, even, you know, it was a newer thing that for people to build tracks. So early on when we were cutting, the label was like, I mean, you guys don't have cut dates. I mean, I don't understand, like, how is this getting done?
Yeah.
But we felt comfortable layering tracks because that's just what our generation of producers, bedroom producers, have done. So, you know, it just felt natural for us to, you know, go at a project in that kind of way. And I feel like a lot of that having a consistent musicians on it is also what makes it stand out as far as, you know, rather than having the same guitar tones or the same whatever that's been on a lot of other sessions today. You know, I know that my guitar tone's probably not going to be as awesome as that person who does it every day, but it's going to be different.
It's going to be different.
Yeah. So, and that's more important than it sonically sounding good, is if it's a different part, you know, and that catches your ear in a different kind of way. Yeah.
So in 2014, when the first single came out, right, and all of this whole thing exploded, right, and you're on the phone to your parents and your fiance back in Louisiana. Tell me a little bit about those conversations, because
I have to say, like, for the longest time, you know, when I had my first single with Dylan, you know, it takes a while for the single to climb up the chart before it gets played on the radio stations down there. So I would tell them, like, you know, I got this song on the radio, you know, but they heard it. Nobody heard it down there. You know, it wasn't on mainstream radio until Kelsey's project. So that was a different thing, because that was the first song that they heard on their FM radio. You know, I had things on XM, you know, and things on the Nashville radio, but nothing that had got that far. So whenever they were able to call me really early in the morning and say, we just heard your song, you know, at 6:30 in the morning on our alarm. I mean, it was just, that's when I thought, man, this could really work.
Right.
You know,
Kelsey's first single is the first song, by the way, by a female artist to top the country music charts since Carrie Underwood's Blown Away in 2012. Isn't that? Yeah. And Kelsey's also the first female artist to take her debut single to the top of the charts since Carrie did Jesus Take the Wheel in 2006. So there's a lot of firsts going on here, you know, along the way with all of this too. When you look back at the series of events in your life that have unfolded in that first 5 years, you know, when you came to Nashville, from 2009 to when you arrived at 2014, when you produced and played and co-wrote and, you know, so on Kelsey's first number one, what goes through your head? How do you account for that? Are you a Christian man? I mean, do you feel that it's a God thing, that it's a destiny thing? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I am a believer, and it's one of those things where I believe that if you show up and do your best, that God will open that door. It might not be when you want it to open. Because if it was up to me, I would have had a Brantley Gilbert hit in 2013. You know?
Yeah.
And little did I know what was waiting behind door number 2 for me.
Yeah.
Whenever, on this, a new artist on a, a newer label, never in a million years would think that would bring, what I was focused on, thinking that, oh, if Brantley was singing that song, my life would change.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it totally happened in a different way, in a much better way that I could ever dream up,
Yeah. Yeah. Did the success of Kelsey's first 2 singles create what kind of a wave of producing opportunities did that create for you? And
well, definitely, you're talking to people that you never thought you'd have the opportunity to work with or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, with the success of her record, I've got a lot of writing opportunities and producing opportunities, but I'm very, I don't want to say necessarily picky because that sounds wrong, but like whatever I invest my production time in, it's more of showing up and cutting songs a day and producing out a record. I really want to spend time with that artist, get to know that artist, and find why they want to do this, and find out why it, what makes them special and sets them apart. And it is that big of a deal to me whenever I work with an artist. So out of the phone calls that have come in, I've only been selected very few to move forward with, just because I just want to work that way. I don't want to stay.
Sure.
I could stay busy. Yeah. I mean, if I just wanted to produce a lot, that's not what I want to do. I want to grow as a writer, and I want to develop other artists.
Yeah.
And grow that and let that kind of be what I do as my branding as a producer, rather than just cutting any record.
And you mentioned to me, I know that Mutt Lange is, has been a big influence on
absolutely.
you, and that kind of also stems from the way I think he operates, doesn't it? You told me that.
Yeah. I mean, he's worked on fewer records than a lot of producers out there, but go look at the records he's worked on.
Exactly.
And what they did to music, whether it be an AC/DC record or a Shania Twain record. It was, I don't know. I just feel like the time that he took, and he's notorious for taking sometimes years to cut an album. And I just feel like, as meticulous as he was and how specific he was about sounds, I want to carry that on as far as making sure that it's different and sounds the best it possibly can.
Yeah. Kelsey's third single, Peter Pan, also absolutely flew up the charts to #1, making her the first female artist to accomplish this feat, period. First 3 singles all going to #1. You co-wrote Peter Pan with Kelsey and Jesse Lee. And I'd like you've shared the backstory with me.
Yeah.
I'd like you to share it.
Yeah. So, actually, in a room right above us here, it was just a regular writing day. And it's the first time I was writing, I think it was both of our, maybe I'd written with Jesse once before, but she showed up, and, Kelsey didn't have a deal or anything at the time. So, we were just writing, we didn't know we were writing for a Kelsey record. Of course, we were going to try to write something, just whatever great song it was that day, like we always did. But it was just, whenever she came in, she brought the title and introduced it in a way of like, look, if we don't, I have this title that I love, and if we don't kill it, I'll probably take this and write it with someone else. And so, I feel like it really lit a fire to me and Kelsey, in the sense of like, she don't know we're about to kill this song. Like, it really encouraged us in a way of like, we're going to take this thing home. And we both, immediately when she said Peter Pan, and the whole about never growing up, it just, it unfolded very quickly because of the kind of idea it was. You got it immediately.
Yeah. One of the things that that you and I talked a little bit about was artist development and the whole process of artist development. I find it interesting that there are producers in this town who do not do artist development. What do you think the reason is? I feel like, is writing the difference? Like Dan Huff doesn't do. He told me point blank, I don't do artist development.
Well, and he's done all right for himself. It's one of those things where people have different ways of working. I feel like to get my full potential as a producer, I need to be writing with you, because I feel like that, we find things in the writing room that, I necessarily can't, lock into from just hearing a string of songs.
Yeah.
I feel like part of developing an artist and setting them apart is finding and revealing a part of their true personality in whatever the music is. And like whenever you hear a record, my goal is for you to know that it's Kelsey before she even opens her mouth to sing, because the music sonically sounds like her. It sounds like her personality. Now, that's weird, but that's the way I think of it.
No, it's not. I know exactly what you're saying.
That's what I try to do.
It's like you know off the intro.
Yeah.
Just like that.
So, and just like a new project that I'm working on, it's completely opposite sonically than what Kelsey's is. And I'm sure that'll surprise a lot of people whenever they see my name on it as a producer, but it's not my record. It's the artist's record.
Is that Jacob Douglas?
Jacob Davis.
Davis.
Yes.
Why did I say Douglas? I'm sorry.
It's all right.
My apologies. Jacob Davis.
Yeah.
Tell us about Jacob.
Jacob is awesome. He's actually a Shreveport, Louisiana boy himself. And, he just signed here not too long ago. And so I've actually been writing with him for about 5 years too. So it's funny. A lot of people think, and I've heard people say like, oh, so Jacob signed over there and Black River's just putting you with him as a producer. And I was like, no, that's not the way it works. I've been writing with him for years. It's been a slow cooking thing for us to be able to work together. But I actually wanted to work with him years ago, and honestly didn't have the credits or necessarily the experience to have the opportunity. But now I do.
And when can we expect to hear something?
Early next year.
Early next year?
Early next year, yeah.
Wonderful. And you guys, you and Kelsey and other writers, I'm sure, are currently writing Kelsey's next album.
Sure.
Can you give us a little kind of overview, 60,000 foot overview of
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's definitely different than the first time. And I feel like there's some darker aspects that are really interesting. And I don't know, the content is different. It's where it was a bubbly teenager in this first record. I feel like there's a lot of growth and a lot of just looking back at life, and a lot of songs that reflect where she's been the past couple years. And so I'm excited for that to be released, because again, it's different. It's different from the first time, and we didn't make that record. We're not making that record over again.
Yeah. Wonderful. Let's do a little pop quiz.
Sure.
Okay, you ready?
I think so.
All right. Favorite all-time song?
I Will Always Love You.
I Will Always Love You.
Or If I Can Dream by Elvis.
Wow. Favorite sport?
Tennis. I know I'm weird.
You're a tennis player.
I love tennis. Yeah.
Oh. Favorite book?
The 7 Laws of Success. 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, I think it is. Short book. You got to read it.
Your favorite restaurant in Nashville?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I love some food. Let's see. Man, probably Stony River though.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Favorite all-time movie?
Forrest Gump, man.
Yeah. Your second biggest passion after your work?
Oh, my wife. No, I'm just kidding. She's first, really. But no, it's one of those.
That's the right answer.
No, but like I'm very passionate about. I mean, to do what we do creatively, it takes a lot of time every day. So for me to focus on her or go play tennis and totally disconnect.
Does she play tennis too?
She does.
Yeah, great.
But it's one of those things where I'm passionate about being able to disconnect from it, because before she was here, I just did it all the time.
Yeah.
And that's good to a certain extent, but it'll drive you crazy at the same time.
What's the most co-writers you ever co-wrote a song with?
I don't know, 4 or 5. I don't know.
Yeah?
Probably 4 or 5. Yeah.
Okay. The hardest decision you ever made?
Oh, that's a tough one. Hardest decision I ever made. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that one. I want to come back to that one.
If you could save any endangered species, what would it be?
Turtles, if they're endangered.
Turtles?
I love turtles.
Name one thing that comes to mind, and I know you're very young, okay, but name one thing that comes to mind that you know is going to be on your bucket list.
Well, a continuing thing that just never is going to be off my bucket list is just to be happy, simply. Just be happy. No matter what I'm doing, I just want to be happy. So that's one that's always a number 1 or number 2 on my bucket list.
If you could produce anybody you wanted on the planet, who would it be?
The next big thing.
Great answer. Okay, if you could snap your fingers and change one thing about the music industry, what would it be?
Oh, that's easy. That songwriters would actually get paid.
Yes.
Sorry, I got comfortable on that one. I was just like, no, but I mean, like, I thought that, you know, writing and the royalties were, I mean, they obviously are a lot different, but I had this, it was really a surprise when I came to Nashville and I had a hit song and understood what Spotify plays. You hear and you read the articles, you don't really understand it till you get paid for a hit song and you realize, I can't live off that.
Yeah.
Seriously. I mean, but at a time, you know, let's fast forward 15 years ago where people could be in town and have a couple of cuts on some records that actually sold whenever they went to Walmart and slid the barcode and actually bought records, and you had to buy all those songs where, I mean, people could make a really good living doing that. And that's actually the dream that I thought that Nashville was. I'd heard all this stuff. Little did I know the information I was getting was like 15 years dated. Till I moved up here and I was in the thick of it before I realized, hey, there's not really a whole lot of, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to say there's not a lot of money in it, because
No,
there
I
can
hear
be,
you.
but there's a lot less than there was.
Yeah. And hasn't this been wonderful having Forrest on the show?
Whoa. Thank y'all. Yes. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Be sure to subscribe for new episodes every month and join us next time.